Hello everyone. So today we'll be learning about what we call arithmetic operators. But before that, I need to tell you something really interesting. So for example, you want to write a comment in your program. So it comes really handy when we have really long lines of code and you need to remember that which code snippet does what, or you want to add comments because you want some other person to understand your code or something like that. So for that, you use comments. And whenever you write a comment, Python would not evaluate it and would simply consider it as a comment and would just move on. So if I want to add a comment, what will I do is I will place a hash and then write whatever I want to write. So we are going to study arithmetic operators today. So the first arithmetic operator that we're going to talk about is called the addition operator, or simply plus. So for example, if you want to add two numbers, you can just place a plus sign them and Python would evaluate it. Same is the case with the minus sign, that you can use a hyphen at the place of minus and it would evaluate that. For multiplication, you need to use a star operator. And for division, you will use a slash. So there's something really interesting that we call floor division. So what it basically does is to divide two numbers and remove the decimal part of it. So for example, if I have, let's say, 3 divided by 2, my answer will be 1.5. But if I want to remove that 0.5 after 1, I can use floor division, and for that I need to place 2 slashes and my answer would be 1, right? So this is what we call a floor division. And another interesting thing that we're going to talk about is what we call a modulo. So what a modulo basically does is that it provides you with the remainder of the division of two numbers. So for example, if I have 23, I would place a percentage sign and 5. So 23%5 would give me the remainder of the division of 23 and 5. So this is what we call a modulo. So what if you have more than one operators in one line? So there is something that we call PEMDAS precedence. What it basically is that whenever you have more than one operators in one line or in one expression, some operators are prioritized over others. So for example, division is prioritized over addition or subtraction or whatever, right? So PEMDAS basically is an abbreviation to help us remember the precedence order. So P stands for parenthesis, and that means that parenthesis is given the first priority over every other operator. The second one is the exponent, third one is the multiplication and division. So both multiplication and division are given the third priority, and whatever comes first would be evaluated first. So for example, if division comes before multiplication, then it would be solved first, and if multiplication comes first, then it would be evaluated first. After that, we have the addition and subtraction as our fourth priority, and whatever comes first would be evaluated first. So as an example, I have this. So we have two parentheses, one division, one multiplication, and one addition in that expression. So the innermost parenthesis would be solved first. So 10 plus 2 gave me 5. Now we would solve the outermost parenthesis first, and in that outermost parenthesis I have two other operators as well, and division and multiplication, and both of them have the same precedence. So whatever comes first is evaluated first. So 12 divided by 4 gave me 3, and 3 into 3 gave me 9. Now I am left with only one operator, and that is addition, and that gives me 14. So this is how precedence works, and we will look at some more example in the quiz following that, so that you could have a better idea of how it works. However, if you don't want to bother about all of these precedents, or you think that it's very difficult to remember when you are programming lots and lots of code, so if you want to evaluate something before another thing, what you can do is you can just use parentheses, and it would help solve your problem. So there is another operator that I wanted to talk about, and that is exponent. So in order to put an exponent, I would use 2 stars and it would evaluate it, right? So 1 star for multiplication and 2 stars for exponent. So that is all for the arithmetic operators. Now there's another thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is data types, or something that we call values. So what they basically are is they are just literally some things that we work with in Python. So we are going to discuss 3 data types. One of them is called the string. So what an string basically is, so if you have something that is not an integer or not a number specifically, so you use 2 quotes around it. So for example, if it is a text like hello world, so you put 2 quotes around it, and that is what we basically call a string. If you want to know the type of any of the data type that you have, you can use a function just like the print function that we worked with in the last video, and that function is type, and you insert whatever your data type is inside it, and it would tell you it's literally its type. So class string, so that basically means that hello world is classified as a string in the layman terms. Another data type that we're going to talk about is called integer. So it's pretty cool to understand. So for example, if I have any number like 45 or let's say 34, whatever, so it translates to the class of integer if we use the type function for it. And there's another data type that we are going to talk about, and this is what we call floating point numbers, and these are literally any of the numbers with the decimal in them. So for example, if I have 45.6 or 78.9 or 78.0 literally, or and I use the type function for it, so it would translate to the class of float. Now let me ask you a quick question. So for example, if I have a number with double quotes around it, so for example, if I have 45 and double quotes around it, what would its type be? So most of you would be tempted, or many of you would be tempted to call it a number. However, since it has 2 quotes around it, it would evaluate, Python would evaluate as a string, right? So what if we have something, some number as a string or double quotes around it, and we want to use it as an integer? Or for example, if I have some number and I want to use it as a string, so what should I do for it? So there are some more functions that help us transfer from one data type to another. So for example, if I have quotes to quotes 45 and I want to add, let's say, 56 in it, so if I write it as it is, Python would give me an error, right? Unsupported operand type for integer and string, right? There is no way we could add a string and an integer together. However, if I use a function that we call int, so the int function, what it basically does is it converts whatever inside it to integer. So it can be a string or a floating point number. Yeah, it evaluated, right? And let's try it with some floating point numbers. So for example, if I have 90.6, it would just give me 90, right? So just like the integer function, we also have a string function, and what it does is that it converts anything inside it to a string. So 45 is converted into a string, or 67.5 converted into a string, right? Similar is the case with the floating point number. We have the function called float, and for example, if I have something called string 45, it's a string but it's a number, and it can be converted into a float, so it will convert into a float. However, if I have some text as a string, so for example, I have Swaleha as the string, it would give me an error because there is no way I could convert Swaleha into some floating point number, right? And if I have a integer inside it, it would convert it into a float, right? Pretty cool, isn't it? Right. So there is one small error that most of the students do, and I wanted to point that out, is that most of the people are tempted to use commas while writing really big numbers. So for example, if I want to write 100,000 and I put a comma in between it, so it won't give Python won't give me an error on it, but it won't evaluate it as an integer. It would evaluate it as some comma separated value. So it would consider 100 as something different from 0, right? And this is what we call a tuple, and we will discuss it later in that course. So yeah, so don't make this mistake, and if you want to write really big numbers, don't write comma in them and just write them as it is. So yeah, it's an integer. That's all for today, and we're good to go. I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much.